Okay, everybody, welcome to Middlesex County Council, Tuesday, May 24th, 2022 at 1 p.m. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and I'm sure everybody is recovering from the wild weekend that we had. I know we've had some wild long weekends, but I don't think that's what we had in mind. Thank you again to all the road employees, the volunteer firemen, and the EMS who quickly reacted to this violent storm system, one that I'm sure that none of you have seen before. It's a fairly new phenomenon to me. I've never seen such widespread damage happen. I know we've had local stuff, but that is incredible. And this, I also want to highlight that this week is our paramedic services week, and later on I'll be visiting our EMS headquarters, and just to let them know how proud we are of the work that they did through the pandemic and have continued to work so hard out of it as well. And it'll be a great week to honor them. Speaking of honoring, I think we had some awards as well. Our economic development department, they received multiple Hermes. Is that how you pronounce it, Kara? Hermes, like the scarves and the
like the god.
Oh, I was thinking more of the clothing. So platinum and gold awards for a total of 4 marketing initiatives. The department was recognized for their efforts in producing the Middlesex County Culinary Guide, Discover Our Grassroots Official Tourism Map, From Our Hands to Our Table video series, and the 2021 Visit Middlesex Tourism Commercial. With these awards, we're very proud to celebrate and highlight our successful food producers, local restaurants, and tourism businesses across all of the communities. The county extends its sincere appreciation for the Hermes Creative Awards for these prestigious international marketing honors. Congratulations, Kara. Now, moving on, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing and hearing none, they're going to go right into the business arising from the minutes. And the minutes of May 10th, 2022, meeting of County Council, looking for a mover to approve them as presented. And that would be Councillor Robb, seconded by Councillor Elliott. And anyone opposed? Seeing none. Now, I know if you're following the agenda, we're going to go on to now the second thing here that says Council adopt the recommendations of the Committee of the Whole as set out in the minutes of the May 10th, 2022 meeting. I'm looking for a mover there. Councillor Richards, seconded by Councillor DeVitt. Anyone opposed? So we do have a public meeting today on your agenda. However, we're going to start that at 2 p.m. So we're going to work through that. We're going to go through a regular meeting and then come back to that. So at this point in time, I'd like a motion to defer the bylaws to the end of the meeting following the public meeting. So looking for a mover. Councillor Elliott, thank you. Seconder. Councillor Mayhew. Anyone opposed? Oh, okay. So now we're moving into the Committee of the Whole, which will be at 1:04 p.m. So again, looking for a mover to go into the Committee of the Whole, please. And that would be Councillor Brennan, seconded by Councillor Corneliuson. And anyone opposed? Seeing none. Now we're going to move on to no delegations and no reports of county officers, but we do have an action item in front of us, and that would be 2B1, a tender for tractor replacement, which was approved in our capital budget. A report from Brent Kerwin, Strathmere Lodge Administrator. So welcome, Brent, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Warden, through you to Council. Just to remind Council, Strathmere Lodge does have a tractor that is used by its maintenance staff to maintain lodge grounds. As the Warden indicated, Council did approve in its 2022 budget to replace the tractor. And as such, a request for tenders was recently posted on the Bids and Tenders website. Full Line Farm and Garden Equipment Limited of Glencoe submitted the lowest cost bid in compliance with the posted tender. And as such, I am recommending to Council that the bid submitted by Full Line be accepted, that the Warden and Clerk be authorized to sign the written agreement between the Lodge and Full Line, and that the necessary bylaw be forwarded to Council for approval. Happy to field any Council questions.
Any questions for Brent? I'm sure everybody got a chance to read the tender and look at it. No, I don't see any questions. So we have that the bid submitted by Full Line Farm and Garden be accepted, and that the warden and clerk be authorized to sign the agreement between Middlesex County and Full Line Farm and Garden, and necessary bylaw be forwarded to council for approval. So looking for a mover? And that'd be Councillor Richards, seconded by Councillor Mayhew. Anyone opposed? Good, because the grass is getting very long and they need that tractor. Thank you, Brent. Now moving on to 2B2 or 12B2, proposed plan of subdivision, municipality of North Middlesex, file number 39T NMT 2101, Asable Bluffs, Gilrad Developments. And Dirk, this is your report. Whenever you're ready, go ahead.
Yes. Thank you. Through the warden, the Asable Bluffs plan of subdivision would create 250 lots for single detached dwellings, and then 2 blocks for medium density, approximately 75 townhouse units. And this is a property in Elsie Craig, just off of Petty Street. And if you're familiar with Craigwell Gardens, it's just sort of to the south of that. I'll touch on this again later in the report, but the intro does note that a north portion of this property already does contain a proposed plan of subdivision that was approved by the ministry in 1991, actually. And so that does make this a little bit different than the typical file that you'll see. So this report is a short summary from the perspective of the county. The more detailed information and all the attachments are also attached. I did note in the report that North Middlesex Council did support this application at their April meeting, and there was some public feedback in that local process, including concerns related to land use compatibility between the medium density blocks and surrounding residential uses, including Craigwell, increased road traffic, and then drainage and environmental issues. Through the agency ministry circulation, all comments either were addressed or can be addressed as conditions, and we've included conditions, proposed conditions to address the South Bayfield, the municipality, of course, the county transportation department. So my report gives a high level review of the policies, and in the end, I am recommending, I'm satisfied that they're met, and I am recommending approval. And then as I noted, the one slight wrinkle here is we do have this existing plan of subdivision from 1991. And in the old days, the ministry would approve these without a lapsing date. So once somebody had this approval, it just is there forever. And we have a few of these legacy files. Needless to say, that plan is no longer the most appropriate way to develop this property, and it only applies to a portion of it. So I would be asking if council was to approve the new plan of subdivision, and there's some wording for a motion, that they also withdraw approval, the ministry's approval of that previous plan of subdivision that applies to a portion of the property. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions, council? Okay. So we have a recommendation, actually 2 recommendations, that the proposed plan of subdivision granted draft plan approval subject to conditions, and that a notice of decision be circulated as required by the Planning Act, and that the notice of decision indicate that all written and oral submissions received on the application were considered, the effect of which help make an informed recommendation and decision, and that the proposed plan of subdivision draft plan approval be withdrawn and a notice be circulated as required by the Planning Act. So mover. And that would be Councillor Cornelissen, seconded by Councillor Smith. Anyone opposed? So moved. And now we have 12B3, non-standard color crosswalks. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, Madam Warden. I'll pull up my report here. So this is my report on the non-standard color crosswalks in response to the notice of motion presented by Councillor Smith. It's a bit of a challenging report from the county engineer's office perspective. We tend to like to think of things in engineering, and we tend to like to follow guidelines that are basically followed across the province. And we have some challenges here, not only with sort of a non-standard type of installation, but also with a bit of shared jurisdiction here. Sidewalks and pedestrian infrastructure, including crosswalks, are really under the jurisdiction of local municipalities, but we need to work together collaboratively when those crosswalks go over county roads and county infrastructure, simply because there's some shared impact and some shared liability that needs to be addressed when we're dealing with those types of locations. So council may recall back in 2017, we passed a crosswalk guideline that basically gave some direction to local municipalities for when they wanted to consider a crosswalk over a county road. Certain guidelines and principles that would be followed. generally aligned with the Ontario Traffic Manual and the Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices. I apologize for diving into some acronyms in my report, but these are two manuals that are used by roads professionals across the province and across the country. And they're generally accepted as good guidelines. And the reason we follow those is so that drivers have an expectation and can understand the way things are represented on our roads and the direction that signs and line painting gives to those drivers, no matter where they are in Ontario and generally across Canada. So I've broken down some of the concerns that I considered with regards to requests for non-standard color crosswalks. And the first one would be with regards to safety. And we've seen some issues arise over the last couple of years to such a point that we've had some municipalities either suspend or removed non-standard crosswalk installations. Now, these are not simply non-standard colors. We do see other types of non-standard crosswalks in place across the country where the painting of the crosswalks could be solid. So the whole crosswalk is completely covered in road paint. We've seen crosswalks where the shape of the crosswalk is slightly different, whether they're slightly curved in some cases, or the rungs are slightly different shapes. And actually the city of Moncton was one of the first to remove some of those crosswalks. So in response to that, the Transportation Association of Canada is, I think, almost finished with their study, and they're planning to release the report. I hope to see it at the TAC annual conference this year, but it may get pushed into the fall. But they're concerned with a number of issues, including driver perception and reactions, slip and skid resistance on those crosswalks, and something new and something that's going to become a developing issue, which is recognition by automated driving systems. So they're looking at those issues around non-standard crosswalk installations, and City of London actually is one of the funding partners of that study. And again, we're hoping to see the results of that released to the public later this year in the fall, is what I was told by tax staff. I contacted them earlier this year. So I'm not saying that we need to park this study until then, although that would be something that we could consider. But again, to sort of limit liability, there's a few recommendations that I would make with regards to that safety perspective, which is, again, to make sure we're following the other issues with the crosswalk guidelines. So we're not installing these in non-standard or non-warranted locations. We don't use paint colors that are reserved for other types of line marking. So the construction orange, which gets used from time to time, the green, the light green you see for cycling infrastructure, and then things like reds. That the reason stop signs are so effective is really it's the only red you should see when you're traveling along roads. So reserving those types of colors, and then distracting colors, the bright fluorescent colors, those types of things. So we'll be reserved to the recommendation is to reserve those types of colors for other uses. Not deviating significantly from the ladder pattern. When I mean a ladder pattern, when you lay a ladder down on the ground, that's what a normal crosswalk would look like. Two solid white edge lines and then rungs with breaks in the paint pattern to allow for skid resistance and allow for slipping and wet conditions for pedestrians. And then it creates some familiarity to people about where they should be walking within the crosswalk. And again, that includes those two solid white border lines around whatever other colors are used within the actual crosswalk itself. And then I would also strongly suggest we don't modify any locations. We don't have a lot of them across the county, but modify locations that are either PXOs or pedestrian crossovers, or at our traffic signal locations. Again, just a one for recognition by drivers. There's some specific rules they need to follow across when they're traveling through PXOs, and some fairly new rules for drivers in those situations where the pedestrians have the right of way. So I wouldn't recommend that we alter those types of pedestrian crossings. The last one is about, and I think Councillor Vanderheen will have a question about this, which is indemnity. And we can certainly have a more fulsome discussion about this. But again, to recognize the fact that there is, some change from an accepted standard that's used. And when those standards change, the county, although we're not directly in jurisdiction of the crosswalk, crosses county infrastructure, and therefore there's shared liability there. We would ask the local municipality to accept the liability for issues related to non-standard color crosswalk installations. Again, I just caution that we do know this report is coming soon from Transportation Association of Canada. And really, if there's strong recommendations in that report, whether this gets passed now or later, I will be back to council to give you an update on those recommendations. Cost is somewhat of a cost neutral issue for the county, but I wanted to put it in the report. Cost would be the responsibility of the local municipality wishing to install the non-standard color crosswalk. And again, my thanks to Councillor Smith for forwarding those couple of different crosswalk policies that are in place in several other areas in Ontario, giving me some idea of costs. And I asked around a little bit as well about costs for types of paint installations, and they can range from about $2,000 to, it could be well over 15, but those would be quite rare. And again, those would need to be covered by either a local group or by local municipality. And then my only other caution would be there was some mention in some discussion around the notice of motion about colored crosswalks for events, and just some cautionary advice about installing a non-standard color crosswalk for a short period of time to promote an event, and whether or not there are better means by which and other policies under which types of promotional materials like flags, overhead banners, those types of installations are permitted and allowable under different policies and guidelines and permits through the county road system. And perhaps we would always be happy actually to work with local groups promoting those events to help them better understand what's available for them to use to bring local notoriety to those types of fairs and other local events. The most challenging thing about these non-standard color crosswalks is this social and cultural issue. I have myself received and continually received requests for not only non-standard color crosswalks, but requests to name bridges, requests to name streets, and really the county roads department policy has been to remain neutral. Even colors of bridges. Most recently in Dorchester, when we put up the new Dorchester Bridge, we had requests to paint that bridge in a non-standard color. And really we stay with sort of that standard construction green, just not only because of cost, but again, just to try to remain neutral with regard to either supporting or not supporting different positions or viewpoints or cultural issues that are, out there in society. So it creates a number of challenges for us to deviate away from those types of policies. And again, I'm not saying that this is something that shouldn't be considered, but it is something that should be thought as seriously about when we're talking about these types of supports for these types of social issues. Again, they're not commonly universally accepted. So there is some challenges there with regards to those types of requests, because I have gotten some somewhat strange requests for different colored things and naming of certain pieces of infrastructure that certainly council wouldn't consider, and I don't consider it, at all. So again, part of my recommendation here would be that if a non-standard color crosswalk is requested, that even though it may not be part of a county budget or be part of, a county initiative for pedestrian movements, because it crosses a county road, I think certainly there would be some expectation from the public that the county is also in support of the issue that's being represented on that crosswalk, or supportive of the event that's being promoted through a non-standard colored crosswalk. So I would defer to the political will of county council to either support or not support that issue. So I would recommend that that be included as part of the policy for consideration of a non-standard color crosswalk.
All right.
I just wanted to also just say, Madam Warden, I'll get to the end here just very quickly. I've talked about jurisdiction enough. Just to say that the report attached, if you go right to the end of the crosswalk policy, that Appendix C is there, and there are a number of points in that Appendix C. And my recommendation at this point is that because crosswalks are really under the jurisdiction of local municipalities, along with sidewalks and other pedestrian infrastructure, that we allow the local public works officials and other local officials to consider this policy before it gets enshrined into this guideline. And that's my recommendation coming out of this report, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Anybody have some questions? I think did Councillor Vanderheyden have a question? She's
Yes, I'm here.
okay.
I have a question, Madam Warden, on the report where it's under number 5, and it talks about the crosswalk. So point number 5, let me grab the report, sorry. If non-standard crosswalks are approved, it is recommended that the final approval for installation by staff should not be permitted to decide which issues are appropriate, although these installations are technically under the jurisdiction of the local municipalities. Since they are on county roads, will be audibly considered supportive of these issues. Just kind of wondered what that meant.
Yeah, through the warden to Councillor Vanderheyden, it's really just one of the ongoing concerns, I would say, and maybe it's an educational concern that I would have with the public understanding who does what on our road system and in our communities. So I would say that many people don't understand the difference between a county road and a local road. You know, we do get calls about things that are happening on subdivision streets, and and vice versa. I get forwarded concerns from your public works officials about things that are happening on county roads. So I think there's generally a lack of knowledge about who is under, which roads are under which jurisdiction. So my comment in the report is if we start painting non-standard color crosswalks across county roads, will likely, even though those crosswalks would be under the jurisdiction of local municipality and the request may come from a local group or the local municipality, is very likely, in my opinion, that people who know that they're county roads will think that the county themselves decided to paint those crosswalks in those colors. So that was the point I was trying to get across in my report.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor DeVete.
Thank you, Warden, through you to Chris. Thanks for the report. I just want to clarify your recommendation where you're saying that it would maybe be useful to defer until such time as, York draft says include the appendix. I'm wondering whether it should be deferred until such time as the transportation report comes out in the fall, and that the whole thing is done in one move and the whole package goes to each municipality for review and comment. It's just a question that I guess we could do this as you suggest, but does it make sense to wait? I guess is my question.
Yeah, through the word to Councillor DeVete, it's a great suggestion. Again, this is not something that I would just put in my back pocket, regardless of what recommendation comes from council. We do meet. I'm very happy to say we've got a very progressive group of public works officials across Middlesex County. We do meet regularly, and this is something we will discuss, and I will present to them one way or the other. But I do think we do need to have input from local municipalities about consideration of these types of policies. There may be problems here that I don't understand or I haven't thought of at this point. But again, there is this TAC report coming out. And again, that might be something that comes from some of our local officials, which is they would prefer to wait till the TAC report is available. And I don't know what's being considered locally as well about what you're doing on your streets with regards to non-standard color crosswalks. I'm not sure how prolific they are out there and how many there are in service right now. And again, we would do a little bit more of that to work together as a group. But again, I thought that at this stage, even if the TAC report comes out and says we shouldn't be doing this, at least we'll have had some consultation with the local municipalities. Again, it's just a question of how we want to proceed with this. Do we wait and then circulate? Do we circulate and then wait? Do we just, do neither until the fall? Again, that's the will of council.
Yeah, Councillor Smith, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you, Warden. Through the Warden to Chris. So just reading through the Appendix C, is it my understanding that really at that number 1, which is the only crosswalks installed in accordance to Section 3.3, the supervised school crossings will be considered? So are those specifically the only crossings that you're suggesting should be allowed to be painted the non-standard paint colors? Or because you also mentioned about submitting to county council. So I'm a little confused.
Yeah, through the warden to Councillor Smith. Yeah, right now, without having the guidance of the TAC report, I would be wary about changing a PXO. So a PXO, pedestrian crossover, they're designed fairly specifically in order to protect pedestrians, right? Pedestrians and PXOs have the right of way generally. So we want to be very careful about modifying those designs, right? There's quite a bit of infrastructure that goes in there with regards to signage and the sort of the sawtooth pattern that leads into and out of the crosswalk. Some regulations around banning parking around those crosswalks. So we're trying to be very careful with those installations just to protect pedestrians who, for good or for bad, may always assume cars are going to stop, and we want to make sure we protect them as much as possible. And having them looking down at a colored crosswalk or non-standard colored crosswalk, we want them to have attention on the traffic as well. So in those cases, that's why I was not recommending that. The benefit of staying under the section 3.3 is that we've modified our guideline not to adhere strictly to those school crossing locations. We do permit local municipalities to install those in sort of non-standard locations or where they may not have the pedestrian traffic. So it would, in my mind, make it easier for municipalities to consider sort of a non-standard colored crosswalk in other locations that wouldn't meet other areas of the guideline. I know it's challenging, especially, for example, in Alley Metcalf, due just to the volume of pedestrians and the volume of traffic on roads to warrant PXOs, which is a bit of a downfall of the Ontario Traffic Manual, in my opinion. But regardless of that, we've tried to find space in the OTM to allow for crosswalks to occur in places like Kerwood, for example, where we could provide those types of facilities. And those locations, I think, would be good opportunities for us to consider sort of non-standard installations.
If I could just have a follow-up, if I could, I guess maybe I'm not understanding. So are you saying, so specifically if we're talking about in Kerwood, that we would be able to do this in the future? Or like right now, if this was passed or not? I'm very confused because you keep kind of talking in circles.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. You would be able to do this in Kerwood. So if Alley Metcalf Council decided they wanted to do a non-standard crosswalk or even a crosswalk in Kerwood, we would consider it under section 3.3, which is the school crossing crosswalks, which is the fluorescent signs that does not give priority to pedestrians. It doesn't create a strict set of traffic rules or external type of things to the crosswalk we would have to do with additional signage and painting. And with that same request, you could ask to have a non-standard type of installation of a different colored type of crosswalk. And that would apply across the county. So if there's areas that don't meet the OTM manual for PXOs, which are fairly prescriptive, they're in the guideline, you would be able to say, we want to put in a school crossing, for example, and we want to do it with, I don't know, green rungs instead of white, for example. And that would be permissible under these new guidelines, pending the conditions under Appendix C.
Okay.
I hope that makes it somewhat clear.
It does. It just, to me, it's still confusing because under section 3.3, a school crossing also has to have a crossing guard there for a portion of the day. So that doesn't sound like we'll be doing that in Kerwood.
Okay, any other questions? All right, so there's a recommendation that the draft copy of the Middlesex County Crosswalk Guidelines, including Appendix C, non-standard paint color crosswalks, be circulated to local municipalities for review and comment. So, Council, what are your wishes? Mover, Councillor Elliott, seconded by? Is that Councillor Robb? Sorry. Yep. Okay. And anyone opposed? You opposed, Councillor Smith? Yeah, noted. And so moved. And moving on now to 12B4, Black's Bridge Detail Design. Chris, it's yours.
Thanks again, man. We're just get to that report. So as council knows, we've had a couple of emergency bridge closures in North Middlesex. Unfortunately, they're very close proximity to one another. The Blacks Bridge and the Nairn Bridge. Middlesex County forces moved into Blacks Bridge a number of years ago in order to undertake some repairs. And upon further inspection, we found that the bridge was structurally unstable, so it had been closed to traffic. And we enlisted Dillon Consulting to come on board to work through the process so we could get into a rapid replacement of that structure. We're at the stage now where the environmental assessment is nearly complete. We're moving into the detailed design and contract administration part of that project. This report is recommending that we continue to work with Dillon on this project in order to get us to that stage. this type of consulting fee was anticipated in my original budget of about $2.2 million for the replacement of the structure. And be happy to answer any questions about the board.
Any questions regarding Black's Bridge? No, okay, then I have the recommendation that the work plan be issued by Dillon Consulting Limited with a detailed design assignment for Black's Bridge in the amount of $199,400 be approved. Councillor Robb, seconded by Councillor Mayhew. Anyone opposed? Okay. So carried. Moving on to 12B5, speed limit bylaw spring update. And Chris, it's you again.
Thank you, Madam Warren. I'll try to be a little briefer here. So we do this twice a year. We just look at speed limit requests as they come in and analyze them with our staff. When these come in from members of the public, the OPP, and we do our own internal analysis for speed limit review. And this is a mix. Wardsville, outside of on Longwoods Road by the golf course, we had a concern raised by a member of the public about speed of traffic around the golf course and speed of traffic coming into Wardsville itself. Really, upon review of things that were mentioned, such as the curvature of the road, there were some issues around concern about fog and those types of things. We reviewed those. The road profile is designed such that it does really exceed by a great number of kilometers the posted speed limit, and it's perfectly safe. And we will continue to work with the OPP for additional enforcement in that area, because I believe that will have the most positive effect on travel speed. So we're not recommending changes there. Slight adjustment in Kamoka. This one's a little bit on the west end of the village, and another slight adjustment in the village of Denfield at the north end of the village. These are adjustments just based on what the development looks like in those areas, and we feel that these are reasonable adjustments for the settlement area for those two settlements. Sylvan Road, again, a question about curvature of the road we examined, and it certainly meets or exceeds all the guidelines for the posted speed limit. And then we installed new traffic signals at Egremont, in Poplar Hill, and we're just doing this out of consistency. We've have a 70 km/h speed limit zone all across Egremont, in Middlesex Center, in Lobo, in Melrose, and now in Poplar Hill. That's the recommendation, to reduce that speed limit to 70. And that's the report. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions for Chris? All right, so there we have a recommendation that the revised bylaw designating prescribed rates of speed on county roads 1 to 81 inclusive be approved as presented, and that the warden and the county clerk be authorized to execute the bylaw at the June 14th, 2022 council meeting. Looking for a mover, please. Councillor DeVitt, seconded by Councillor Richards. Anyone opposed? Okay, so moved. And now moving on to 12B6, Legislative Policy 5.01, Media Relations Policy. Report from Marcy Ivanich, Manager of Legislative Services and Clerk.
Perfect. Thank you, Warden Warwick. So as outlined in the report, this is a draft media relations policy that was prepared as part of phase 3 of the communications strategy RFP. So thank you to Aaron, who's on the screen here. The policy reflects best practices for media relations and supports the implementation of the new communications strategy. A couple of highlights. The policy designates the Legislative Services Department as the primary point of contact for media interactions. It assigns approval of outgoing media responses to the appropriate department head, sets out processes to be followed for interview requests, designates authorized spokespeople for the county, and mandates media training for all staff and officials with regular media contact. So the recommendation is that Council approve Legislative Policy 5.01, the Media Relations Policy, and that the Corporate Administrative Policy and Procedure Manual be updated. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Mayhew.
Thank you, Madam Warden, very much. Marcy, I just want to compliment you on the letters that I've seen come through on our consent agenda from the county regarding what's new from the county of Middlesex. That is extremely effective in communicating a message. It illustrates why we meet and what we have accomplished. And I appreciate that very much. And from a selfish point of view, I do report to my council on matters of what the county does. And at sometimes I'm extremely cautious of what I write because I don't want to violate any, my opinion or my vision of a particular discussion may differ from others. And I like the idea that communication can come out to the various municipalities with consistency and accuracy. And I want to thank you very much for that. And I hope it continues. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mayhew. Any other questions, comments for Marcy? Well, seeing none, then I have a motion here that council approved legislative policy 5.01 media relations policy and that the corporate administrative policy and procedure manual be updated. So looking for a mover. Councillor Mayhew, seconded by Councillor Ropp. All in favor, or you know what, anyone opposed? No. Moving on now then. So move to 12B7, council remuneration review. And looks like you and Cindy, Marcy.
Yeah. Thank you, Warden Warwick. So in 2019, Council adopted a resolution directing staff to undertake a review of council remuneration prior to the end of this term. So working with Cindy, and I really do need to give Cindy all of the credit for anything math related here, but working together, we were able to establish the appropriate municipal comparator group and to make a recommendation to increase council remuneration for the upcoming term of council. The recommended increases would bring both the warden and councillor salaries to the 50th percentile of the comparator group. This was established as the appropriate percentile during the last review in 2019, so we are remaining consistent with that approach. So the recommendation is that council remuneration be increased to the 50th percentile of the municipal comparator group, resulting in the following increases. Warden increased by $5,218.59. Councillors increased by $1,286.19. That the above noted increases be effective on November 15th, 2022, the start of the next term of County Council. That Council maintain its median 50th percentile goal for the compensation of its elected officials, and that administration continue to report back on external elected officials' compensation comparisons once per term of Council. Thank you, and Cindy and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? No, seeing none. Then there is some recommendations here that council remuneration be increased to the 50th percentile of the municipal comparator group, resulting in the following increases. Warden increased by $5,218.59. Councillors increased by $1,286.19. And that the above noted increases be effective on November 15th, 2022 at the start of the next term of County Council, and that council maintain its median 50th percentile goal for the compensation of its elected officials, and that administration continue to report back on external elected officials' compensation comparisons once per term of council. So looking for a mover. Councillor Burkhart Jessen, thank you. Seconder, Councillor Elliott, all in favor? Well, you know what? Yeah, opposed, nobody, all in favor, yes, and we're good to go. Okay, moving on now to correspondence and information items. 12C1, electronic payments. Anyone have any questions regarding those payments? No, then we have a total for April of, oh, that's a big number, $2,665,767.30. So looking for that to be received for information. Mover, Councillor Mayhew, seconded by Councillor Cornelissen. And anyone opposed? Seeing none. We have 12C2 AMO policy update, which I'm sure everybody got a chance to read. 12C3 letter from Community Schools Alliance. Very interesting letter, and just wondering if council would like to, I think there was with this, ask if we wanted to receive and consider supporting this. Yeah, Councillor Elliott.
Thank you, through the warden. I would I would make the motion to support this resolution that the Community Schools Alliance has put forward. I think it's important. The Rural and Northern Education Fund is really what keeps our rural schools going. And the moratorium, if the new government comes in and releases that moratorium, I think that puts a huge risk to our small and rural schools in our communities. And we know that when it all boils down to it, that funding model is one of the biggest issues that our schools face in our communities. And so I think this resolution that the Community Schools Alliance put forward is very important and really addresses the real needs of our community. So I would move that we support this resolution.
Okay, thank you. Seconder? Councillor Mayhew, and I'll just maybe I'll read the resolution. It's in the letter already, but just in case we need to review it. Whereas all students should have the opportunity to attend elementary and secondary school in their home community. Therefore, be it resolved that the province increase the Rural and Northern Education Fund to 50 million, and that should the current moratorium on accommodation reviews and school closures be lifted, we ask that the moratorium remain in place for schools that qualify for the RNEF until a thorough review of the education funding formula is completed. And before templates required by the 2018 pupil accommodation review guideline are developed, there should be a consultation with school boards and community groups, including the Community Schools Alliance, and a copy of this resolution shall be forwarded to local MPPs. So we have mover, we have seconder, and all anyone opposed? Seeing none, then we're going to move on to looking for, did we get, you know what, we've gotten that one approved. But do we have 12.C2 approved, the AMO policy? Okay. And so that we're going to receive that one for information, but we don't need to worry about the 12.3 now that we've done that, or receive that for information as well. Okay. So both of those, the AMO letter and the other letter to be received for information, looking for a mover. And Councillor Richard, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Anyone opposed? Nope, seeing none. Any inquiries? No, new business. Just a reminder, our next meeting is June 14th, 2022. And we're moving on to announcements. Very pleased to announce that the Middlesex County Wardens Charity Golf Tournament will be June 23rd. And I'm looking forward to that. We've sent a letter to Michael Landsberg telling him that part of the money will be sent to his Sick Not Weak campaign, and the balance of the money raised will be going to the Dorchester VON, which is a place I feel very committed to. So I'm very happy about that. So looking for, do we have to let move and second for that we're having it? Okay. Okay, got it. So it's now 1:43. So I'm going to ask that the committee of the whole rise and council reconvene its regular council meeting. Looking for a mover. Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Vanderheyden. We do have this public meeting. It is to start at 2 o'clock. So do we need a motion just to take a break for a little bit? Okay, so we'll get back for the public meeting for 2 o'clock. Maybe a few minutes prior would be good. So a motion to adjourn until then. Councillor DeVete, seconded by Councillor Robb. Anyone opposed? All right, we'll see you back